Okay, this is a nice report from McKinsey that looks at what is needed by 2050 in terms of CO2 removal, gigaton scale removal, of course, and how are we doing in terms of getting there, but not from just technology side. It's also from market potential and investments and barriers and so on. So McKinsey Sustainability is got this new report out, came out in December 2023. I'm recording this in December 24, so a year ago. Carbon removals, how to scale a new gigaton industry. CO2 removal or CDR capacity is far from the gigaton scale needed to round out net zero efforts by 2050. We explore a mature CDR market's potential and possible first mover advantages. Essentially, we need CDR to meet our global warming targets and net zero goals. Decarbonizing the world will happen with renewable energies, EVs, and everything else. Manufacturing cement, steel, aluminum, etc. Then you will have residual emissions that need to be taken out. So the IPCC has made it clear that CO2 removal CDR is a critical tool for achieving net zero by 2050 because it could enable businesses to neutralize residual carbon emissions once all emissions reductions efforts have been exhausted. Thus, by 2050, CDR competency could be a core part of the management responsibilities across all sectors. This report provides an analysis of the market potential for CDR, the investment requirements, and market trends. It also identifies which actions are the most likely to lower the barriers to scaling CDR and delineates potential advantages for first movers in different stakeholder groups. So we'll see what that means. CDR's role in reaching net zero, we already know this, and I won't read all of it, but the capacity that we need gigaton scale, so 6 to 10 metric gigatons per year as estimated by this report called The State of Carbon Dioxide Removal, which I have summarized elsewhere. How do we get there? This capacity could not be delivered quickly, however, so efforts would need to begin as soon as possible to ensure 2050 scenarios are achievable. Some estimates require an additional 0.8 to 2.9 metric gigatons of CO2 per year of removals capacity by 2030. 2030 is a good horizon where if we are not on a trajectory on all these things, then we are very likely to struggle to meet the 2050 goals. Okay, so keeping all that in mind, given CDR's potential importance to achieve net zero commitments, removals could become a routine consideration for businesses across sectors. For companies to claim they have reached net zero under Science-Based Targets Initiative corporate net zero standards, for example, after they have exhausted decarbonization actions, they must neutralize any residual emissions. So we've talked about SBTi before as an agency that certifies these things. We looked at it when Understanding Carbon Markets report was summarized. So closing the removals gap to achieve net zero would require a range of CDR solutions comprising both nature-based removals and technology-based removals. So we will look at a bunch of these as we go forward. NBR could also play a role in removals over the long term to ensure flexibility and balance in removals capacity, but also it has many co-benefits if you use wetlands, coastal blue carbon, the afforestation or reducing deforestation and so on as a part of NBR. They have tremendous co-benefits as well, as opposed to just technology-driven drawdowns of CO2, right? So durable solutions are generally preferable to ensure removals efforts remain effective in the long term. So increasing volumes of such solutions would be needed. Accelerating the scale-up of durable TBR, technology-based removals, would require near-term investment and innovation to reduce their relatively higher costs. And there are other details as to how fast you get there and what the cost will be overall if you rapidly bring down fossil fuels and so on and so forth. So let's jump to some nice figures. The CDR market, $1 trillion potential. A CDR industry capable of delivering gigaton scale removals at net zero levels could be worth up to $1.2 trillion by 2050. This industry would require input and support from a range of players, including investors, suppliers, buyers, traders, and other intermediaries. So this should work as a major motivation, the market size expected, and there is already an article in New York Times saying how this has become a holy grail and has driven a lot of investments in this direction as well. So look at the figure. Suppliers will likely capture 70 to 80% of value in this industry, with traders likely capturing more value over time as the market matures. Market revenues by value chain segment in billions of dollars. So we are looking at market revenues by value chain from advisory, validation and credit, financiers, traders, and suppliers. So lower removals requirement, higher NBR share scenario, so nature-based shares. So you can see how the numbers will ramp up, and the dark blue colors here are the advisory market revenues. So McKinsey is in this business, for example. Higher removals requirement, higher TBR share scenarios. So the corresponding advisory market value goes up, or revenue goes up as well. And advisories here, this colors don't make sense, sorry. Suppliers is the dark blue here, suppliers. So advisories are a tiny part here. So validation, financiers, and traders. Okay, sorry about that. Make sure you understood it. Looking at the second part of it, share of supplier revenues by CO2 solution type. So these are suppliers of TBR or NBR. They are the ones doing the removal. So blue carbon, cropland and grassland, forestry, other technology-based removals, biochar, DAX, direct air captures, and BECCS, bioenergy and carbon capture and sequestration. I won't dwell on the numbers, but these are projections, and they see various ways in which these will play out. So, for example, BECCS seems to have a dropping contribution to supplier revenues out to 2050 in both of these high and low. So we're talking about lower removal requirements and higher removal requirements and so on. Okay, so these are nice estimates just in terms of looking for investments and so on. So investment would be needed to support innovation, to drive down costs, and to support project development. Analysis in this report estimates the cumulative investments in CDR required to deliver net zero in 2050 at $6 trillion to $16 trillion. So we'll look at the figure here. Okay, so what is it saying? Delivering CO2 removal capacities for net zero will likely require 6 trillion to 16 trillion of cumulative investments by 2050, far below expected levels. So the numbers have dropped from the previous estimates essentially. Net zero investments, so investment to date where we are, and that's at 5 to 13 billion. 2030 expected investment is 100 billion to 400 billion, and 2030 required investment, so expected and required, you can see the big difference, 0.5 trillion to 2 trillion. Okay, so that would be what is needed to meet the Giga-Ton scaling. And by 2050, net zero cumulative investments needed would be 6 trillion to 16 trillion, as this number says here. So then the question is, how is it going to happen? How is it that we're going to scale up to this level of investment to make net zero or drawdowns, scaling up of carbon removal to gigatons possible, right? So then you have to look at market trends. Reducing costs through CDR innovation. The CDR market is currently trading at high prices and small volumes, particularly for emerging technology-based removal. I won't keep saying that, but CDR, TBR, and NBR, you should just remember. High prices for more durable CDR solutions are likely driven by small capacities and high costs of production. Innovation is key to fostering the higher volumes and lower prices needed to deliver CDR at scale. With continued demand, investment, and innovation, TBR costs are estimated to decline by at least 30% and up to 60% through 2035 and continue to drop through 2050, albeit more slowly as the industry scales. So we'll look at that here. Costs for solutions that currently carry higher costs are estimated to decline fastest through this scenario, though this scenario relies on the assumption that the required levels of investment in innovation can be achieved, keeping these numbers in mind. NBR costs, on the other hand, may rise over time as land resources become constrained. NBR costs could rise by 20 to 60% through 2035 and 15 to 40% between 2035 and 2050. So when we say BECCS, bioenergy and carbon capture, this has got a lot of debate about where bioenergy feedstock will be grown, whether they will compete with food prices, food security, water security, energy security, and so on and so forth. Okay, then you have to worry about lowering barriers to scaling CDR. Scaling CDR to deliver net zero removal volumes is a challenging endeavor, fraught with complexity and nuance. Indeed, the risks and challenges facing the industry have been documented at length in this reference. Nice list of references that I'm not going to go into, but you should definitely read up. And these include a need for stronger buyer incentives, improved transparency of standards as well, and of course practices and services. You will need clear public sector signals and innovation to unlock lower cost solutions. And finally, of course, increased removals capacity itself to attract these investments and so on, to lower barriers. So unless the technology and the volumes of drawdown don't keep increasing, unless they keep increasing, you won't have barriers coming down any easy way. This report explores actions stakeholders across the CDR value chain could take to fulfill these needs. So technology-based removal costs are expected to decline over time, while costs for nature-based removals will likely increase. So we are looking at levelized costs in dollar per metric ton of CO2. Economic terms, you can look at how the baselines are used to levelize the costs. So here we are going from x dot x to x dot x, so estimated CAGR across time periods, cumulative investments, and everything is done cumulatively. So you go from $1,000 per metric ton of CO2 in 2022 for direct air capture and storage, and keep dropping, and you come down to the range of so this 2.2 to 2.4 and 1.7 to 1.9 are the CAGR across the time periods. Okay, so let's make sure clearly. I forgot what, you read these reports and you want to remember everything and not really put everything on the slide, and then you just blank out on these things. So la 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 CAGR, it's cumulative something or the other, but always frustrating when you forget, but that happens, right? Come on, give me what is CAGR. CAGR, doesn't even define. It's just introduced as CAGR, and there is no let's Google it, since I'm wasting time anyway. As I said, this is not the way to do things, folks, but it happens. What is CAGR? AI is always going to help, right? Compound annual growth rate. So it's probably a standard economics term that technology people like me don't know, which is a shame because I should know. But anyway, compound annual growth rate. Okay, so not cumulative at all. Okay, so screw ups happen, folks. It's okay. So we are looking at basically dropping costs and the CAGRs going from minus, or that's the drop. So negative numbers means how you drop. So essentially you want to keep the levelized cost to be as low as possible for metric ton of CO2 drawdown, right? Good news is they are expected to drop in this projection. Existing and developing policy measures and public funding have the potential to accelerate investment along with the enhanced project level economics that reduce costs and improve future revenue streams. Governments and philanthropists and non-governmental organizations could work with the private sector to spur innovation for example, by addressing how CDR is incorporated into ESG and carbon accounting frameworks, as well as how CDR could be integrated into cap and trade or carbon tax systems, which we discussed in the podcasts on understanding carbon markets. Governments and philanthropists could also consider directly funding early stage technology development or designing innovative financing arrangements that may help catalyze further private investment. So this is going to play out in the sense governments have committed to Paris Agreement. They have nationally determined contributions that they have to meet in terms of the targets by certain dates, and if CDR is seen as a part of that goal, meeting those targets, then they will be relying on NBR and TBR, and they may very well begin to incentivize innovations in these directions to increase the CDR volumes, right? Early mover advantages in the CDR industry then, although the challenges for scaling investment and innovation are not inconsiderable, tangible long-term benefits are potentially available to those who engage in critical near-term efforts to scale the CDR industry. So where you throw the money based on your risk or future expectations will obviously be deciding who are the early movers, because early movers themselves try to estimate the advantage they would have by moving early into these new directions. Indeed, the analysis in this report indicates that there may be strategic and competitive advantages available to early movers prepared to address these challenges together with other stakeholders. So if you keep the markets in mind of 1.2 trillion, then you expect the markets to attract investors, but also incentives from governments and of course early movers who see advantages in doing this. How long am I stopped mucked around for a few minutes, so we're still 16 minutes, and let me go a few more points here in the executive summary, which is what we are reading. Investors that engage early could gain valuable experience in spotting new opportunities and assessing their potential ahead of investors who wait for the market to grow before they engage. And CDR projects can have long lead times to start delivering removals. Some TBR can take up to 8 years to begin removing their first volumes of CO2. Early alliances and support for growth enterprises could help investors reserve the right to play as the industry matures and scales. Early investors could also fortify their reputations as climate leaders by being at the forefront of creating an essential net zero industry, potentially realizing 20 billion to 80 billion in CDR market revenues by 2050, according to the value pools analysis in this report. So there are details that you can read up on. I'm obviously skipping over many of these. Suppliers, then CDR project developers that generate carbon credits based on capture and storage activities, NBR and TBR together, could earn 73 to 82% of estimated CDR market revenues at 250 billion to 900 billion by 2050. Because they carry out physical removal activities such as carbon capture, transport and storage, while other market players enable their efforts, suppliers could capture the largest share of industry revenue. So there is going to be a value chain that everybody is going to calculate their benefits by investing in these things. So when demand scales, for example, if CDR is recognized in carbon trading systems, suppliers will need to be able to respond rapidly to meet it. So there will be a lot of carbon trading offsets can be bought as CDR. Somebody is doing CDR for you and you pay for it happily to meet your targets. Because of what could be largely unrivaled access to technology, talent and capital resources, established suppliers could have a significant advantage in expanding programs quickly and successfully. Early movers could be positioned to develop approaches to move down the learning curve sooner than those who engage later, thereby reducing early movers' costs. Well, you are also taking a massive risk, so you may end up losing, but that's what early investment, early advancers, early adopters means. In terms of buyers, early buyers that sign future offtake agreements with suppliers could gain confidence that they will have a reliable future removal supply. even in the event of increased demand. If companies were required to purchase CDR to offset emissions, for example, following changes to regulations or guidelines in carbon offsets, then demand for CDR credits could rise sharply, which means if the available capacity for CDR is limited, then early buyers will have an advantage in terms of offsetting their emissions with CDR that they already lined up for, and late buyers may not find providers, right? So that's always a good thing to keep in mind. There are also other considerations. A well-considered ESG strategy underpinned by CDR could support business aims such as talent recruitment and green premiums. So ESG is facing lots of opposition now, just like DEI and so on. But nonetheless, assuming they will become part of the compliance requirements, CDR would definitely help you meet ESG as a core benefit, and then a lot of newer generations may seek jobs which are meeting their targets in terms of CDRs, or at least emissions and ESG and so on, right? Marketplaces and intermediaries then, as seen in other markets, as volumes grow for CDR, trading for removals volume could coalesce around a small number of major marketplaces in a winner-takes-all dynamic. This dynamic would result from reduced intermediation costs and increased liquidity of the industry operating through a small number of marketplaces. Market intermediaries could earn 9 to 14% of estimated CDR market revenues at 40 billion to 140 billion by 2050. This is according to the value pool analysis in this report. Marketplaces could aim to attract new and future buyers by moving early to establish a solid reputation for technical expertise, quality assurance, pricing knowledge, and the ability to diversify. Meanwhile, early moving standard setters that develop high integrity methodologies for the major CDR technologies could inform the core standards around which voluntary carbon markets for removals can operate or will operate. Okay, let's come back and let's just read this one as well. Governments, of course, have a role to play. Governments that move early to support the CDR industry could shore up their domestic removal capacity to align their nationally determined contributions commitments with the Paris Agreement, satisfy other green commitments, and secure national supplies. It may also be that you may become an exporter of CDR technology or earn a lot of money by doing CDR to meet the demand from the rest of the world market. CDR could be a global opportunity in that sense. A variety of CDR solutions means countries could utilize those solutions best suited to their particular geographies. For example, countries with access to low-cost renewable energy could enjoy cost advantages using energy-intensive CDR, such as direct air capture. Likewise, countries with significant land-based natural assets could be potentially benefiting from expanded nature-based removals, and coastal and island states could find emerging blue carbon solutions affording them advantages. In addition to supporting CDR, could provide governments with opportunities to promote skill development and job creation, thereby helping to facilitate a just transition to a net zero economy. Very optimistic view, hoping, being optimistic also about NBR and TBR. Based on our analysis, CDR capabilities may become a core strategic concern for governments, investors, and businesses alike. This report offers analysis of the market potential for CDR, potential actions to scale CDR rapidly, and opportunities for near and long-term advantages for early moving CDR stakeholders. By reflecting on the analysis and data presented here, business leaders can gain a foundational understanding of CDR and how it may factor into their organization's net zero strategies and overall goals. Bold actions taken today can scale CDR capacity to meet global net zero requirements. CDR capabilities may become a core strategic concern for government, investors, and businesses alike. Emphasizing here, by reflecting on the analysis and data presented here, business leaders can gain a foundational understanding of CDR and how it may factor into their organization's net zero strategies and overall goals. Okay, So if once everybody starts to see CDR and having a leg up in the technology, uh, is going to be a socially good thing for shareholders, good thing for recruiting good employees, and so on, then there could be a mad rush, or could be just like smoking it has become more and more of a social stigma, polluting may become a social stigma, so CDR may serve as a major way to, uh, block the social stigma by emitting but having CDR to effectively remove them as well. So there are, of course, others who will say the technology is never going to materialize and never going to mature enough to reach gigaton scales and so on, but that's not an option in terms of trying right now. So we have to think about the future with an optimistic vision of CDR as a big part of the solution, not only for net zero but also for global warming targets and keeping global warming as low as possible, because there will be irreducible emissions even with complete decarbonization, right? So let's come back and maybe wrap it up in the next podcast, okay?